Good morning, everyone. Welcome to New Orleans and the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, home of the Sun Belt Conference, and for today's Football Media Day. Now only 38 days before the beginning of the 2018 season, when on August 30th, ULM opens the SBC season at home against in-state opponent Southeast Louisiana. The first of 40 non-conference games that feature 12 games versus the Power 5, 12 versus our peer conferences, the Group of 5, 6 versus FBS Independence, New Mexico State, UMass Liberty, and 10 games versus teams from the FCS. This morning I have the privilege of kicking off today's Media Day with what has been advertised as the State of the Sun Belt Conference. And I can capture that headline quite easily by using just 7 words. The Sun Belt is on a rise. As many of you recall, back in the summer of 2014, the Sun Belt introduced a marketing campaign with the slogan, "Together we rise." It was at that time that the Sun Belt was reestablished in itself following the aftermath of nationwide conference realignment as 5 Sun Belt schools left to join Conference USA. We responded by adding 5 outstanding football programs to go along with the 5 that remained under the Sun Belt umbrella to get to the 10 football programs represented here today. And now 4 years later, and due to the commitment of the presidents and chancellors, athletic directors and football coaches, and the dedication and hard work of every Sun Belt football student athlete who has played in the past 4 years, the Sun Belt has indeed lived up to that slogan. And that every key indicator that can be used to evaluate the strength of a conference has indeed risen for the Sun Belt in the past 4 years. While in-game attendance may be down in some conferences, attendance is up in the Sun Belt. While end-of-year revenue distribution may be down in some conferences, the Sun Belt will once again provide our membership with a record distribution, nearly 10 times what it was in 2014. And throughout the conference, we have seen sizable facility renovations and additions, again a commitment by our presidents and chancellors. We've also seen a dramatic change in our non-conference scheduling strategy that is evident when you look at the composite schedule and see only 12 games against teams from the Power 5. Our smart scheduling model is 1 game versus the Power 5, 2 versus our peer conferences, and 1 versus the FCS. And again, a tribute to the commitment by the presidents and chancellors and athletic directors. And while sacrificing perhaps as much as $1.5 million for a second game versus a P5 opponent, the decision has been made to give our coaches and student athletes a much more reasonable chance of having a winning season and advancing to a bowl game. And speaking of bowl games, in the past 4 years, we've increased our number of bowl agreements from 2 to 5. And during this time, the Sun Belt has won 11 out of those 18 bowl games, which is the highest winning percentage of all 10 FBS conferences during this time period. And finally, with the extension, the early extension of our agreement with ESPN, not only will our yearly revenue more than double, every home football game will be available to our fans on one of the ESPN platforms, and culminating this season with the Sun Belt inaugural football championship game on Saturday, December 1st. Game time is yet to be determined, but we expect either mid-afternoon or early evening game time on either ESPN, ESPN2, or ABC. Yes, the Sun Belt is clearly trending up in the world of college football. And now today, as the Sun Belt begins its 18th season as an FBS major college football conference, the youngest of the 10, we launch a new slogan, Rise Above. And we are prepared and poised to do just that as we compete against our 4 peer football conferences, the Mountain West, the MAC, Conference USA, and the American. And while 1 or 2 of our peer conferences may have other goals, the Sun Belt's goal remains the same as we stated 4 years ago, to be the highest rated Group of 5 conference and to send our football champion as the highest rated Group of 5 team to one of the New Year's Day games. And there isn't any reason that this goal cannot be achieved this year. The pieces are in place, the commitment has been made, the coaches are in place, the student athletes are in place, and we are expecting that the Sun Belt champion will be playing in one of those prestigious New Year's Day games this year. So yes, the time is now, and the Sun Belt is ready to rise above. It's a privilege for me to be part of the Sun Belt Conference. It's this event that has allowed, I think, the world to really see the Sun Belt and the progress that we've made. A big tip of the hat to my staff and all those that are responsible for the creation of this event, the development of this event, and the execution of this event. It's a testament, again, and I think it really resonates everything that I just finished saying about the commitment that has been made to the sport of football in the Sun Belt Conference. With that, we'll pause. We will entertain questions from the media as well as the audience. There are two microphones, one on both sides. I will try to identify the first hand up, and we'll start on this side. Anyone on this side? Dan McDonald, followed by Tim Buckley.
Karl, what's been the reaction to the announcement of the championship game inaugurating this year?
Excitement, enthusiasm, and especially when we think about that the championship is going to be played on one of the home campuses. And that even makes, the regular season, more valuable, and the conference season really takes on a valuable piece in that we know what home field advantage can do. We know what it can mean to the home fans, and we expect that that the team that hosts this will have a great showcase for not only their program but also the Sun Belt. I've been asked many times about the quick turnaround. Yes, it's possible. We may not know until 7 days in advance what campus we're on, and I've likened it to that ESPN's traveling game day. Some of those decisions aren't made until the Monday before, and what they've been able to do to create that type of environment for a pregame is exactly what we're going to try to do. That we will set up our own, ESPN-like game day, inside in the state, outside the stadium, heavily dependent on the home team. Not that the visiting team won't bring fans, depending on the distance, but we hope to create that type of a game day experience similar to ESPN Game Day. Tim?
Karl, how comfortable are you with 5 as the right number for bowl tie-ins, and how solidified is that lineup, not just for this year but years to come?
The NCAA has gone through a process over the course of the last year that has determined how many bowl slots each conference will be allowed to enter into, and it's an average of it's a 4-year average of how many bowl eligible teams they had during that course, and so the 5 is exactly the number of is our average. So there is no not that we won't have more than 5 bowl eligible teams, and not that the 6th or the 7th may get an opportunity as an at-large, but we can only enter into 5 agreements. And we're going through a process, as all the other conferences are right now, and as you've read or heard, of the recertification process. The averaging that the NCAA did and the allotment of bowl games to 2 or 3 other conferences would allow for an additional couple new games into the system. None have been announced yet. You've seen some that have been advertised, whether it's Myrtle Beach as one, obviously, that we would be interested in being part of. But again, the 5 current bowl partners that we have been loyal to us, and we expect that that we will return that loyalty and really try to do what's in the best interest of of the Sun Belt. On this side, Ted Lewis.
Karl, how do you see the playoff system benefiting the Sun Belt, and also with most of the conferences going to the Power 5 going to 9 conference games, how's that going to affect your scheduling down the road?
Well, as far as the college football playoff, and I was remiss in not introducing Alfred White with the college football playoff, representing the CFP that's in the back of the room, and he'll be available throughout the morning. Alfred, stand up and make sure everybody knows Alfred is a longtime, in fact, Alfred and I worked at the NCAA together back in the 80s, and he's been a commissioner. He's been an associate commissioner. He's now working for the CFP, but he'll probably give you his views on the current status of the CFP. It's valuable to the Sun Belt, and unlike some of my conference colleagues, I think that right now the system that's in place works well for the Sun Belt. Our goal, as I said, is to have that highest rated champion and to play in one of those games. And until we accomplish that, that will be our goal. And if and when we have a team that had the year that Central Florida had, like they had last year, I'll probably be the one that'll be up here pounding my fist on the table saying we need to have more access. But right now, the access that we have to one of the New Year's Day games, the financial addition has been tremendous. I mean, that's what has allowed the Sun Belt to do what we're doing right now. And the influx of revenue that we started receiving after the 2014 season when the CFP money came in was a tremendous windfall for the Sun Belt. So, I'm going to stand here and promote the college football playoff, all the way down the road. Front here.
Could you go through some of the thought process that went into how the championship game being at a campus site, and is there ever a point in the future where it might be a neutral site game?
When you look at our peer conferences, as they have evolved their championship games somewhat in order, if I'm not mistaken, the Mid-American Conference may have had the first one, and they elected to do a neutral site in Detroit. And they've continued to be there in Detroit. I think the geography of the Mid-American Conference lends itself to a neutral site. You look at the geography of the other four conferences, and it may not be the case. And right now, we want to be successful in year one and year two, and we'll probably examine after the second year whether the home site is the route to go. But of our peer conferences, the MAC is the only one that has that neutral site. You look at the geography of the Sun Belt, and you look at places where it could be that centrally located, whether it's New Orleans or Montgomery or Mobile. Either side has great great football opportunities for us. So I think we would have some options sometime down the road.
Karl, Nicholas Lewis from Forgotten5.com. Just to backtrack a little bit, I know you've mentioned, and this year's not the first where you've talked about how the college football playoff revenue has allowed the schools to stop, I guess for lack of a better term, chasing those Power 5 games. Can you speak at all to sort of how much the new ESPN deal has changed the payouts and whether or not you see that changing those decisions even further in the future?
Well, again, our revenue in the past 4 years is tenfold. And some of that is the CFP infusion. Some of it now will be ESPN, the doubling of our rights fee there. So it's now meaningful. I mean, when we send our year-end check to the athletic directors, it's a meaningful number that can make a difference on each of those campuses. And when you talk about the value of being in a conference, the Sun Belt now has significant and real value to our members. In 2012, when schools elected to leave the conference, there wasn't any money in the conference. There was very little distribution, and and they looked at at an opportunity to gain some revenue. Since then, we've been fortunate enough to catch up, and those schools that left the conference in 2012. The schools that remained and the ones that we brought in are now realizing, if not just as much, but perhaps even more than what those schools that left are getting. So I think that's real money, but it's also prestige. The Sun Belt for so long has been just labeled as the bottom of the 10 conferences, and that's no longer the case. I think that we've established a brand, we've established the credibility, And again, now is the time to take that next step to really contend, for that #1 spot. Here first and then here second. Tim?
Karl, you may have mentioned one, obviously, with the money, but what are maybe the three, as you reflect back on your year one, the three biggest, most meaningful changes to the conference from then to this point?
Well, the membership stability, the fact that, that we were able to build out the conference. There was the one little left turn that we took when the NCAA required 12 teams to do a conference championship game. Our goal from the outset in the spring of 2012 was that we needed to be able to do a championship game, and we were going to build the conference based on that. And that resulted in the addition of New Mexico State and Idaho, strictly to get us to 12 teams. And once the NCAA changed that rule that only requires 10, we were able to reevaluate. And the decision that our presidents and chancellors made, a very, very difficult decision to terminate the agreement or not to extend the agreement for Idaho and New Mexico State, that was a tough one. Probably one of the toughest decisions I've ever been part of in terms of that type of an impact. So that was I think a big change, but it was the right change. When you make a decision and you can look back at it and say that was the right decision, that was the right decision. It was the right decision when we added them, and it was the right decision when we made the decision to no longer continue with them. I think the bowl opportunities that we've been able to create is #2, Tim. Our coaches, early on said we need a 3rd bowl game, and a year later we need a 4th bowl game, and we need a 5th bowl game. And when we sent 6 teams to bowl games 2 years ago, I mean, who would have thought that the Sun Belt would be sending 6 teams to bowl games? And the partnership that we've made with those 4 or those 5 bowls has given the Sun Belt credibility. And at the same time, once we've had that opportunity, then it's up to the coaches and the teams. They've delivered, and they've been tremendous, on the bigger stages. And then I think the continuity that we've had with some presidents and chancellors and athletic directors, even though there's been some change, there's been a core of presidents and chancellors. And I look back specifically to Jack Hawkins at Troy, Joe Savoie at UL Lafayette, and Nick Bruno at ULM. That those 3 presidents were there when the plan was initiated, and then as we added schools and new presidents, tremendous presidential and chancellor leadership in this conference.
You mentioned this new deal with ESPN more than doubled the revenue for it. Specifically, how much is it? I
really can't address that. It's a contract that prohibits us from getting specific, which also I would say that when you see a number associated with a conference television deal, chances are it's probably not accurate. So I'm just proud to say that we've increased in value and that ESPN recognized that value and they've rewarded us for it. Ted?
Karl, this is going to date you a little bit, but you were referencing the relationship between the conferences. This is going into the 5th year of the playoffs. The 5th year of the BCS was when Scott Cowan led the access charge, and you were involved in that. How would you characterize the relationship between what's still 2 groups of conferences as compared to 15 years ago?
Well, again, the CFP today is now a real organization. The BCS was never an organization. It was, as they said, a series of contracts between, conferences and TV and bowls. So there was no real organizational structure. The CFP now has a board of directors, and there's a president from each of the 10 conferences on that board, and they meet twice a year, and that there really is especially when you put 10 presidents in the same room, there's a collegiality there that results in making sure that all the groups are provided for. And so I think that it's very harmonious right now. I don't think that there's not any divisiveness. Granted, there's a conference that is pounding their fists that they deserve to be part of this, quote, Power Five. And, I'll give credit to the marketing that they've done. But right now, I don't think that's an attainable goal. And as a result, I think we need to focus on what we can accomplish and look at that. Sir.
Commissioner, with the Supreme Court ruling earlier this year, and I know a lot of your peers were asked about this last week, how does the potential expansion of legalized sports gambling impact how you operate, particularly football, but all of your sports, in terms of information and such that may be going out?
And it is a question that is out there, and there's trepidation, and there's a lot of nervousness. I don't have that same in my previous job with the Western Athletic Conference, the 18 years that I was with the Western Athletic Conference, either UNLV or Nevada was in that conference for the 18 years. And the WAC conducted events in both Reno and Las Vegas. And it was just a common occurrence that, the betting, the sports books were alive. And maybe it's because I lived it. Were we careful with student athletes when there were events in Las Vegas? Absolutely. But I will tell you that one of the most alarming phone calls I ever had was a voicemail in my message box one day. This is Joe Jones from the FBI's gambling task force, trying to get information about a potential game fixing that included a WAC team. It's pretty. Those are damaging, and the schools that have had to go through gambling, student athlete or coaches, those can be devastating. But I don't know if just by opening up the door further, it's going to increase the number of those, because they've always been there. Whether it was the Arizona State or the Boston College, or others that that you can name, University of Toledo most recently. Those were happening under the existing laws, but it is something that could change the fans and how they are entertained for sure.
Hey, Karl. Going back to the new television deal, I think the interesting thing about it is you all still had years remaining on the contract when you extended the deal with ESPN. Was there a sense of urgency on your part to get that extended, or were you approached by ESPN to continue the relationship?
It was mutual. We felt that the timing was right, that we had established value, and we wanted to take advantage of it at a time when no one else was really in the market. There was some strategy in terms of, can we get to the bargaining table before one of our peer conferences, which we did, and I think that we were able to take advantage of that window. If we hadn't done that, I'd be telling you today that we were expecting to begin renegotiations probably in January is when the window would have happened. So, we caught it a year in advance. The fact that the ESPN Plus piece, when we first started negotiations, we didn't know exactly where it was going to end up. And the ESPN Plus added to what the end result is, and I think that was also a positive to be the first ones out there. There was a term during the negotiations that we established with ESPN about being all in, and there's never been a conference that has been all in with ESPN, meaning that ESPN owns every television right. And there were local agreements, and there were agreements with CBS Sports or Fox, joint agreements, but there's never been a conference that was all in, and that was important to ESPN, and I think that that we were able to benefit from that.
Karl, on the ESPN Plus, what's been the reaction from the campuses now that they are basically having to provide their own productions?
We had a meeting last week here in New Orleans with representatives from all 12 schools, and Dan's question has to do with the on-campus production responsibility obligation that is per the contract. And historically, there have been on-campus productions taking place on several of our campuses for years, and depending on the university and their communications department, they've been providing online streaming, and so to some, it really was not a major change. For some, it was ground zero. I mean, they had to start, from the ground up. ESPN and the conference, we've provided some seed money to these schools, and last week they sent representatives. We've hired a consulting company that is helping each school. It's going to be critical that in ULM's point on August 30th, when they flip the switch, and it's live from Monroe on ESPN Plus, we've got to make sure that presentation is up to speed, and I think everybody knows that. Again, I get back to the presidents and chancellors. They bought into this. They recognize the long-term value of making that financial commitment on their campuses to have this type of production facility, and to provide that not only would be athletic in nature, but could be campus-wide production and long-term institutional marketing opportunities.
Karl, have you ever considered some kind of like a scheduling agreement with Conference USA? You almost have one like that, home and home, with some of their certain number of home and home games with their schools. And also, you haven't mentioned expansion. There's a couple of schools out there, Liberty and UMass, that are independent. They're outside your footprint now. Is there any sentiment in the league to take a strong look at those schools?
First question regarding any type of a scheduling alliance with Conference USA or any other conference. Football is really difficult. You only have 4 non-conference games, and we're encouraging, and our schools have bought into this smart schedule of 1 Power 5 and then 2 against the peer. And I think we placed 6 Conference USA teams this year just naturally. And I think that what we've also seen in time, the old, time heals, or time heals the hurts, whatever. The relationship between the Sun Belt and Conference USA right now is very, very positive. We're working together on some bowl agreements. As you saw earlier, there was a basketball scheduling alliance that we're working with Conference USA in. And I think that both Conference USA athletic directors, Sun Belt athletic directors have recognized that being in the same footprint is valuable. Southern Miss needs to play South Alabama. UAB needs to play Troy. Louisiana Tech needs to play the 2 other Louisiana schools that are FBS. Some of those are hard to, I'm not going to control those, I know that. But I've tried. But anyway, I think that the relationship between the Sun Belt and Conference USA is very, very good right now. Expansion, it's off the table. It's never been on an agenda for the last 2 years. You never say never, but right now, we're focusing on the 10 teams. Our other sports are under a 12-team model that makes sense for our men's and women's basketball and our baseball, softball, volleyball, all of our other team sports, soccer. So we think we have the right number for all of our other sports, and we think that 10 right now on the football side, is the right number. Last question.
Earlier you spoke about the BCS. Just to touch on that, one of the big gripes was a non-conference winner getting into the BCS championship. The past 2 years, a non-conference winner has gotten into the playoffs. What is the Sun Belt going to do about a non-conference, possible non-conference winner getting into the playoffs? Are you guys going to have a voice in that?
Yeah, I'm
Speaking
sorry,
up against
I'm not following your question. I apologize. First of all, CFP, we're talking about the CFP playoffs?
Yes.
Okay. The 4 teams? Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you say a non-conference winner,
A
non-champion?
yes, they didn't win their
Non-champion,
conference.
I mean,
So,
that's the
the Ohio
debate.
State,
Right now,
Alabama.
there isn't anything that prohibits the number of teams from a conference that get in. There isn't a absolute that a champion of the 5, there's only 4 spots.
Right. Right.
So,
but
and there's
my
no
question-
requirement that it's a champion. And right now, even though there's 10 votes in the room, more than likely the 5 Power 5 conferences would dictate that. I would be in on the discussion and listen to it, but it's not really I don't think it's a matter for us to chime in on. I think that concludes. We're running a little later than expected, but again, appreciate everyone's involvement, participation. Enjoy the day, and again, if you're interested in a quick tour of the Sunbelt offices downstairs, see me or one of my staff. So appreciate it. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of the day.